Moving on, we have some board action, proposed bond sale for spring 2022. Dr. Swift.
Thank you, President Lazarus and trustees. I appreciate that both finance committees and bond committees reviewed this proposed bond sale prior to bringing it to this board action this evening. I also appreciate that several of you made time for one-on-one conversations so that we were all well prepared for this topic. We all appreciate the support of our Ann Arbor Public Schools community who so graciously supported the 2019 bond in November of 2019. As you noted, President Lazarus, this is a multi-generational effort. It is a 20-year construction program and will really change the projection of our students and their learning experience over generations to come. I appreciate that our community has supported it, that it has been reviewed by both bond and finance committees, and also appreciate that it will give an infrastructure approach that we heard trustees for a decade prior to bringing this forward. And I appreciate that the trustees were courageous to put this bond on the ballot. Our community supported it. Because of those actions, what we're bringing tonight is really carrying out pretty much, I think of them as marching orders given us by the community when they voted to support our bond. So when we think about the amount of the bond, we really are working on an algorithm that balances the resources we need to complete the projects we committed along the timeline that we committed them. And we also, trustees, you remember, it was right in our campaign materials, we committed to keep the levy stable so that there wouldn't be big jumps up or down. So when our financial advisor and Ms. Minnick put that algorithm into play, the sale for this spring is for $50 million. This is year 2 of a 20-year process. I'm delighted to say that we are following what our community asked us to do in carrying out this bond. We do have Ms. Minnick, our Assistant Superintendent of Finance and Operations, and Mr. Colas, who is our bond counsel from Miller Kenfield. Trustees, you have all seen the presentation. They will come forward to receive any questions that you may have about this proposed bond sale.
Thank you. Yes, so as we are discussing, as we endeavor then to meet those commitments as approved by our community and as approved according to the plan of projects by our Board of Education, we are here at the time of our second bond sale, and so that we may continue the work of those approved projects with a stable levy. So we'll overview the fact that we had a bond election in November of 2019. We had our first bond sale in May of 2020. From the time period of June through December of 2020, we did our preliminary project planning so that we could bring to the board for recommendation a bond plan for phase 1 of the work, and that was approved by the board. It was prepared and shared at a study session in December of 2020, and then of course brought for first reading and approved on second reading on December 16th of 2020. And then here we are, as we've worked on those projects and we have utilized those bond proceeds properly, we now find ourselves ready to issue additional bonds and garner more proceeds that we may just simply continue the work of the bond program. So here's just a glimpse of the ballot that was approved by our voters. It outlines the authorized projects. It authorizes the grand total of the maximum amount of bonds to authorize of being $1 billion. And it provides and lays out other types of requirements. And of course, the type is too small. But just to point out a few other things, that we are by law not able to pay any teacher or administrative or school salaries, and it does speak to statute authorized language around the debt levy. And at the time, of course, it was forecasted that the debt levy would be 4.1 mils to pay the debt of these bonds. So then, in accordance with the authorization of the ballot, the plan was developed and deliberated and discussed, as I mentioned, at the study session and first and second readings in December of 2020. And the plan informs then the timing of those projects. Just a reminder on those allowable uses of bond proceeds, they can only be used for capital improvements and purchases. So what does capital mean? Capital is building improvements, renovations, additions, remodeling, and new construction for long-term, long-held assets. It also includes the purchases of land and new buildings, and those purchases of durable equipment. It does not provide for any consumables or supplies, and as I mentioned, it may not be used for teacher, administrator, or school salaries, and it does not provide for repairs or general maintenance. In May of 2020, we issued our first bonds in the amount of $140 million. We were able to garner $11.7 million in premium, and they were 20-year term bonds. That means that those bonds were going to be paid off over a 20-year course, and the bonds were sold via competitive sale. And that means that the sale of these bonds were posted similar to how we might purchase equipment in our district. The notice for sale of these bonds was posted, and investors, folks who would typically buy bonds, which might be mutual funds or financial institutions or insurance companies, would submit bids, and the lowest price would be awarded the sale of the bonds in the form of the interest payments on the bonds. So our next steps then, in May of 2022, we have aligned this bond sale with the board-approved bond plan for Phase 1 projects in the total amount of $50 million. Again, a 20-year term, and the bonds will be sold once again in a competitive sale format. So as you can see, the bond proceeds will allow us to continue our work. The type is a little bit small, and I apologize for that, but it does demonstrate that with the $50 million bond proceeds, we will be able to continue our work in accordance with that plan and fulfill those commitments of the bond. Our next steps then is, once the board offers its consideration and approval for these next steps, we would then sell and deliver those bonds before June 30th so that they may be part of that July 1st levy, which will help to continue that constant rate, and the rate would remain the same. Tax notices for the Ann Arbor Public Schools are issued twice per year, once in the summer, once in the winter, and a reminder that those taxes then may only be used to pay the principal and interest on those bonds. And I'm happy to take any further questions you may have. I want to point out that Mr. Colas was very helpful in presenting some of this information, as well as even more so, the background information that is available in your packets, and then our financial advisor, PFM.
Thank you, Ms. Minnick.